The conference call was still going when my husband's phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wasn't trying to read it. I was reaching past it for my coffee mug. But the name on the screen stopped me cold. Missing you already. Last night was everything. I set my mug down very carefully, the kind of careful you do when your hands have started shaking, but you need them not to. His name was Kevin. That's what I'll call him here. Kevin, who had kissed me on the cheek that morning and asked if we needed more half and half. Kevin, who had been my husband for 11 years, my partner for 13. Kevin, who was currently on a team off-site in Phoenix, where it was currently 7:14 in the morning. I put the phone back exactly where it was, face down, and I went to work. I need you to understand something about the months before that morning. I had already started to feel like I was losing my mind, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, grinding way that made me question everything I thought I knew about my own perception. My husband had gotten better at his job in the past year, or so he said. More responsibility, more travel, more late nights that bled into early mornings. And I had been so proud of him. I bragged about him to my sister. I told my mother he was finally coming into his own. I was 41 years old, working full-time as a hospital administrator, and I had spent 2 of those years, subtly, silently rearranging my life around a man who was not where he said he was. I know that now. That morning, after I saw the text, I did 3 things. First, I forwarded the message to my own email, just the preview, which was enough. Then I pulled up our joint credit card statement, something I almost never did because Kevin handled our finances. He had offered 2 years ago, and I had let him because I was tired and he was good with numbers. What I saw in that statement made me sit down on the kitchen floor. 3 charges at a hotel in Scottsdale, not Phoenix, Scottsdale, 40 minutes apart. Room service, minibar, spa services. 4 separate trips in the last 6 months, each one coinciding with a business trip I had waved him off on with a packed lunch and a kiss at the door. I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. Then I got up, made my coffee, and started building a case. The woman I became over the next 8 weeks was not someone I recognized. She was organized. She was patient in a way I have never been patient. She color-coded a spreadsheet. I did not confront Kevin. I did not cry into my pillow when he came home from Phoenix smelling like someone else's shampoo. I hugged him, asked about his flight, and heated up the soup I'd made from scratch because that was the kind of wife I had been. But I also opened my own bank account at a different bank, a credit union across town that I had driven to on my lunch break. I started putting money in it. Not so much that he'd notice from the joint account, just enough. My therapist later told me this was one of the most practical things I could have done. At the time, it just felt like survival instinct. I hired a private investigator. His name doesn't matter. What matters is that he was thorough, he was discreet, and he handed me a manila envelope 6 weeks later that contained photographs, hotel receipts, and a name I had heard before. She worked in Kevin's office. I had met her at his company's holiday party 2 years ago. She'd complimented my earrings. I had thanked her and meant it. I sat in my car in the parking garage where the PI had handed me the envelope, and I allowed myself exactly 12 minutes to feel it. I set a timer. I cried until the timer went off. Then I wiped my face, drove to my sister's house, and showed her everything. My sister is 5 years younger than me and has always been the more impulsive one. When she saw the photos, she said a word I won't repeat here. Then she grabbed my hands across her kitchen table and said, "Tell me what you need." That was the moment I knew I was going to be okay. I want to talk about the earrings for a second, because they matter. 4 months before I found that text on the counter, Kevin had given me diamond earrings for our anniversary, teardrop cut, platinum setting. He had made a whole production out of it. Dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first real date. A card he'd clearly thought about. The velvet box sitting beside my dessert plate. I had cried at the table. Happy tears. I thought it meant something was shifting, that maybe the distance I'd been feeling between us was just the stress of his new role and he was trying to reconnect. When I looked at our credit card statement, I found the charge for those earrings. And then I found, 3 weeks before that charge, a charge at the same jeweler for a bracelet I had never seen and never received. I was not the only person he was buying jewelry for. I took the earrings to an appraiser. They were worth $3,400. I found out later, through my attorney, that in our state, Texas, gifts purchased with marital funds during the marriage are generally considered marital property in a divorce. Those earrings were going into the asset column. I kept wearing them in the meantime, every single day. Kevin never said a word. My attorney is a woman I will be grateful for until the end of my life. She came referred to me by a colleague, someone who had gone through her own quiet devastation a few years before and had come out the other side with her house, her retirement account, and her sanity. We met in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. I brought the PI's envelope, the credit card statements, screenshots of the hotel charges, and a timeline I had constructed myself in a document I kept locked behind a password he would never guess. She looked at everything without expression. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "You've done more of my job than most clients do." I told her I'd had 8 weeks to practice. What she explained to me over the next hour reshaped how I understood everything. Texas is a community property state. What that meant for us was that any debt Kevin had run up using marital funds, hotel rooms, gifts for someone else, dinners I didn't attend, that was money we were both on the hook for, which also meant it was money I was owed back. We had a 401k in his name that I was legally entitled to a portion of. We owned our house together and had built real equity. I had spent 13 years thinking of our finances as his department. What I learned that afternoon was that they were mine too, and I had the law on my side. She filed quietly. Kevin was served on a Wednesday morning while I was already at work. He called me 4 times. I let them all go to voicemail. Here is where I have to tell you about the reunion. Every summer, Kevin's family rents a lake house in the hill country for a long weekend. His parents, his 2 brothers and their wives, various cousins. I had been going for 11 years. I knew these people. I had held his mother's hand in the hospital when his father had a stent put in. I had taught his niece how to make pie crust from scratch. I had, if I'm honest, sometimes loved his family more easily than I loved him. We had not yet told anyone. I had asked my attorney to keep the filing as quiet as possible for as long as possible, and she had. Kevin knew, I knew. He'd been sleeping in the guest room for 3 weeks by then. A silent arrangement we'd reached without actually discussing it, but neither of us had made any announcements. The reunion had been planned for months. I almost didn't go. My sister told me to stay home, that I didn't owe these people anything. She was not wrong. But Kevin's mother had called me herself. She didn't know anything yet. She just wanted to make sure I was coming. Told me she'd bought the ingredients for the pasta salad I always brought. Told me she'd been looking forward to seeing me. She's in her 70s. She has a way of talking to me that makes me feel known. I went. I drove up separately, which Kevin accepted without argument. I got there first. His mother hugged me on the porch like she always does, both arms, held for a moment longer than necessary, and for reasons I could not entirely explain, I almost told her everything right there. I didn't. I brought the pasta salad inside and said I was glad to be there. The call came on Saturday afternoon. We were on the back deck. Kevin's father was running the grill. One of his brothers was doing something loud and incomprehensible with a paddleboard on the dock. His mother and his sister-in-law and I were sitting in the shade, and it was almost normal, almost like any other year, except that Kevin had barely looked at me all weekend, and I had a folder of divorce filings in my email. Kevin had stepped inside to take a call. A work call, he said. He'd left his phone on the table. It buzzed. Face up. Because he had gotten comfortable. Because I was supposed to be his quiet, trusting wife who never checked. I saw the name, not a company contact name. Not a last name and first initial, just a name. The kind you save when you want to remember who it is, but you're still being careful. Hey you. Thinking about you. Kevin's mother was mid-sentence when I picked up the phone. I answered it. I said, "Hello." Just that. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice said, "Who is this?" And I said, "I'm his wife. We're at his family's lake house this weekend. Would you like to come join us?" I was just about to share some news with everyone. The line went dead. Kevin's mother had stopped talking. His sister-in-law was very still. I set the phone down on the table, smooth side up, and I looked at his mother. I said, "I'm so sorry. I need to tell you something." Kevin came out the back door 30 seconds later, phone in hand, face drained of color. And I was already talking. What happened in the next hour is hard to describe without making it sound like a scene from something. But it wasn't. It was quiet mostly. It was people sitting down. It was Kevin's father turning off the grill. It was his brother asking him a direct question, and Kevin not being able to answer it. His mother didn't say a word for a long time. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, and I could see her doing the math, the same math I had spent 8 weeks doing. And I recognized the look on her face because I had worn it myself. When she finally spoke, she looked at Kevin. She said, "You owe her an apology and a great deal more than that." Then she stood up and came to where I was sitting and she put her arms around me. I did not expect that. I had thought on the drive up that coming here might cost me these people, that they would circle around their son out of loyalty, that I would lose the family I had married into along with the marriage itself. I had prepared myself for it. I had decided I could survive it. I did not have to. She held on, and I let her, and that was the moment I actually cried. Not in the parking garage. Not in my sister's kitchen. There, on a back deck in the hill country, with the lake going silver in the afternoon light. The divorce took 7 months. Kevin did not contest it once he understood what I had documented. My attorney was precise and fair, and not once did she let him or his attorney reframe what he had done as anything other than what it was. We sold the house. The equity was split. His 401k was divided per a QDRO, a Qualified Domestic Relations Order. My attorney explained it to me twice before I fully understood it, and I received my portion without drama. The credit card debt he had accumulated funding his other life was addressed in the settlement. The diamond earrings were appraised and factored in. I walked away with enough to start over and enough to buy a small house of my own, which I did. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen with good light. I repainted every room. I bought a couch I actually liked. My credit score, which I had never really thought about as mine, came through the process intact. I opened a financial planning appointment within 60 days of the divorce being finalized. The woman I met with told me the steps I'd already taken. Separate account, documented assets, legal counsel early, had protected me more than I knew. My sister comes over most Sundays. She brings her kids, and they run in the yard, and sometimes we sit on the back step with coffee and don't say anything for a while. And that is enough. Kevin's mother texts me on my birthday. She texted me at Christmas. I don't know what she says to him about it. I don't ask. I've thought a lot about what I would say to someone who is where I was, sitting on that kitchen floor, credit card statement in hand, the world rearranging itself around a piece of information she wasn't ready to have. Here is what I would say: document everything, and I mean everything. Screenshots, statements, timestamps, dates. Not because you need to punish someone, but because information is protection and you deserve to be protected. Open your own account. Do it quietly, do it legally, do it before you say a word to anyone else. Find an attorney who has done this before and bring them everything you have. Don't apologize for being prepared. And when you decide who to tell and when, trust your gut. I knew, on some level I can't fully explain, that going to that lake house was the right thing to do, not for a dramatic moment, not for revenge exactly, but because I had spent 13 years in that family and I deserved to walk out of it honestly. The woman who answered that phone with hello was braver than she had any right to be. She had 12 minutes in a parking garage and 8 weeks of quiet work behind her, and she was terrified, and she picked it up anyway. I'm glad she did. I wake up now in my own house. In a bedroom I painted a shade of green I have always loved, and Kevin always said was too dark. And for the first few months I kept waiting for the sadness to settle back in, the way it always had. It hasn't come back the way I expected. What came instead was something quieter, something that takes up the same amount of space in my chest but feels completely different. I think the word for it is mine. There's a version of that Saturday afternoon I used to replay, the one where I'd put the phone back down, where I let it buzz and looked away and poured myself another glass of iced tea and said nothing, the way I had been saying nothing for months. That version of me is not hard to imagine. I was her for a long time. What I know now is that every outcome in this story followed directly from a choice. Not fate, not luck. Choices. Kevin chose, repeatedly and deliberately, to build a second life on the foundation of our first one. And I chose, when I finally saw clearly, to stop making myself smaller to accommodate his deception. Those aren't the same kind of choice, but they both had consequences. And the consequences were proportionate to what each of us had actually done. I think about integrity a lot these days, not as a concept, as a practice. What does it mean to act with integrity when everything around you is built on a lie? For me, it meant that even in the middle of the worst 8 weeks of my life, I did not lie to Kevin. I did not fabricate evidence. I did not blow up his family relationships out of spite. I documented the truth, I spoke to an attorney, and I waited until I was ready to tell it plainly. That's not sainthood. That's just the only way I knew how to walk through it and still respect myself on the other side. The clarity I found in those 8 weeks, that spreadsheet, those credit card statements, that manila envelope, didn't come from nowhere. It came from sitting with something unbearable and deciding to understand it rather than run from it. I had never thought of myself as someone who could be that methodical under pressure. I found out I was. You don't always know what you're capable of until the situation asks it of you. And then you either answer or you don't. I answered, and the courage it took to pick up that phone at the lake house, to say hello in a steady voice to a woman who had been in my marriage longer than I knew, that didn't come from anger. It came from 8 weeks of quiet work. It came from knowing exactly where I stood legally, financially, practically. Preparation is its own kind of bravery. You can't manufacture that moment of steadiness on the spot. You build toward it, one small decision at a time. My mother-in-law's arms around me on that deck are something I will carry for the rest of my life. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. She saw what had happened and she chose me anyway. And that told me something about the kind of love that actually holds. The kind that doesn't require you to shrink or perform or pretend. I wake up in my green bedroom and I think, this is what it cost. And this is what it gave back. The cost was real. So is what I have now. If you are sitting somewhere right now with a piece of information you weren't supposed to find, I want you to know that the ground does not have to disappear from under you. Get quiet. Get informed. Find one person you trust completely. And then take the next step, just the next one, and let it lead you to the one after that. The woman who answered that phone was terrified. She was also ready. Both things were true at the same time, and that is exactly how it works.